So welcome. On behalf of One Spirit in Action, we want to welcome you. My name is Heidi Tesmer, and I am an ordained interfaith minister and spiritual counselor. I'm so encouraged to see all of you here tonight to engage in this important conversation about not forgetting our neighbors who are behind the walls. One visible thing that this pandemic has shown us is that we are all interconnected and woven together. Since 2018, I've been volunteering with the One Spirit in Action team, the sacred activism arm of One Spirit Learning Alliance. And I am delighted to be co-facilitating this evening with my colleague, Salome.
Good evening, all. I'm Salome Rahim, a member of the One Spirit in Action team and a first-year student here at One Spirit Interfaith Seminary. Out of respect and in the spirit of healing past and present harms, we will begin with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that One Spirit's center of operations is on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape Nations. I honor their ancestors and recognize the long-standing significance of these lands for them, past and present. I also recognize that I live on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway nations. I pay my respects to them and their ancestors as the original stewards of this land and recognize the history of their genocide and forced removal from this area. So tonight, we come together to remember. That is to consciously reconnect with our brothers and sisters who are so often forgotten. I speak of the 2.3 million people in prisons and jails in this country at this very moment. And yes, that's 2.3 million people. The number of incarcerated people in this country has increased by 700% since 1970. In the United States, we have about 5% of the world's population, but nearly 1/4 of the world's prison population. There is a rupture in our human family that needs repair. Over the past 4 decades, the rate of incarceration of women has increased dramatically and has been twice the rate of men. Currently, 1.2 million women are under supervision in the criminal justice system. Black, Indigenous, and other people of color make up 67%. That's 67% of the prison population, but are only 37% of the nation's population. And what's more, and so painful, is that 1 out of every 3 Black boys born today can expect to go to prison in his lifetime, as can 1 of every 6 Latino boys. For white boys, the stats are 1 in 17. There is an injustice in our human family that calls for action. So we're here tonight to lift up the voices and the lives of our formerly incarcerated brothers and sisters, to reimagine a justice system through a lens of just us, with no one left out, and to identify ways to be in action, to decarcerate and support those who are currently or were formerly incarcerated. We are fortunate to have 4 amazing guests who will lead us in this exploration. Kenyatta Emmanuel, Stacy Borden, Stephen Drew, and Sky. The order of things tonight is that each panelist will be introduced and speak for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by question and answer after all of them have spoken. And then as we bring the program to a close, we'll be sharing resources for taking action, because that's what this is all about. And we'll post a link in the chat so that you can learn more about how to engage in remembering our forgotten community. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Kenyatta Emmanuel, who is an artist and an activist. He will be singing a song entitled, "What Is Left." Welcome, Kenyatta.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. I pray that this message resonates as a reminder of our purpose and priorities. I was just thinking, what if this was the last time I ever saw you? What should I say? What could I leave you that would be sure to endure when it all burns away? Because it all burns away. When I hold all my hopes and discard all my fears, push aside broken promises, smiles, and the tears, the regrets, disappointments, the miles and the years. What is left must be real. What is left must be love. There's something inside me that is so scared to say how important this is. But I believe you know. I need you to know me, but I'm afraid if you know me, you might turn away. Don't turn away. Just look past all the masks, all the armor and walls. Disregard the white eyes followed by the falls. When I grind, when I shine, when I stand, when I crawl, what is left must be all. What is left must be love. You see, the truth is, all of this means less than nothing if nobody's touched by it. All we really have is what we leave behind. So release the resentment you've held for so long. Make amends with your friends even when they were wrong. Seek forgiveness, don't live in the past, 'cause it's gone. Let it go, move along. Try to treat folks you meet like they feel what you feel. You can tear down and destroy or build up and heal. When they burned what can burn and stole what they can steal. What is left must be real. What is left must be love. I was just thinking, what if this was the last time I ever saw you? What should I say? Thank you.
Thank you. Oof. Hmm. Wow, that was beautiful, Kenyatta. Whew. So now I would like to introduce Stacy Borden. She will be our first speaker this evening. Stacy is from Massachusetts and is the founder and executive director of New Beginnings Reentry Services, a Roxbury-based non-for-profit that works to empower incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. Stacy has a master's degree in mental health counseling and is an author, performance artist, motivational speaker, and activist. And just last week, she received the 2021 Visionary Voice Award from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for having me. This is an honor. That was beautiful, Kenyatta. That really was touching and meaningful. And I was thinking about my formerly incarcerated my sisters that I left behind, and my formerly incarcerated sisters in the movement. So thank you for having me. Again, my name is Stacy Borden. I am formerly incarcerated. This is an honor to be here. I'm going to try to condense a short part of my story and why I do what I do. I belong to a national movement, the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, as well as Families for Justice as Healing. Both are community-based programs that allowed me to find my purpose in developing New Beginnings Reentry Services. So just a synopsis about who I am. I come from Roxbury, grown up in Roxbury and Dorchester with 12 siblings. My mom and dad was married 65 years. My father was a recovering alcoholic. And there was a lot of dysfunction in the household and a lot of dysfunction in the community. There was a lack of resources and really didn't have any type of outlet or development to start dreaming and thinking about what I may have wanted to become. Additionally, I come from sexual assault and domestic violence, very early age, and then again, a young womanhood at 18, which really disrupted any type of personal character that I possibly could have developed. It just didn't happen for me. And very early at age 11, I think it was, that I started drug abuse, and that willed into drug addiction and went into the criminal addictive behavior, I want to say, and then into the injustice system. And I say injustice system because there could have been alternatives to help me and 100 other thousand women that are sitting in cages today. All my journey of going through prison in basically Framingham State Prison, I had the fortune to meet wonderful women that I left behind, women that are serving lengthy sentences because they are also survived and punished. And so going through that experience and that process and sitting in a prison trying to figure out why we're locked in a cage and at the will or the hands of gods that, you know, can't even imagine to tell you the culture that type of carceral system produces. I can't even imagine what happens to some of the correctional officers that go home at night and then have to return to work in the morning again to deal with problematic issues, people that are suffering from trauma and mental illness, and we're locking them away and putting them away almost forever. And so when I came into my maturated state, I started realizing, I'm saying, I don't know statistics. I don't know the data. But it sounds like a lot of us in this prison, a lot of us women that are in here together, suffered from the same thing. Who knew that there was somebody else out there like me that suffered from sexual trauma and abuse and from domestic violence? And, you know, what outlet did we have to even address that? So we suppressed it and found outlets and alternatives to deal with that. And so here we are. We ended up in a carceral system that were built for us. And so the whole journey since I came home 2010 was to really develop something structural, something meaningful, something purposeful to help women address that issue, the trauma that we've buried so deep. And so that's what we've been able to do. I came home 2010. I knew that my sisters that I left behind really try to help me in the prison become a little more educated about what's happening in the world and what I could possibly give back once I got out and came back to the community. And I thought, and I started dreaming, and I said, you know, I can't have regrets of what I didn't do or could have done or should have done. Maybe I could do something different now. And I came out and I went and got licensed as a licensed clinician to understand trauma and addiction. And then the whole goal and idea was to acquire a home, a house, which you see behind me. And so the determination was real. The determination was great. And I just kept pushing and putting one foot in front of the other. And I came into a world of people like you all that said, hey, we probably could have this as a solution, as an alternative to sentencing. And so that's what we did. We created New Beginners Reentry Services for the past 5 or 6 years. Our ultimate goal was to acquire a home to house 10 to 15 women and start really addressing the issues in the world of heart. I love that, Kenyatta. I'm saying that's how we heal, through music, through theater, through the world of arts, through education. And so that's what we did. We built a solid program that allows women to come out of prison into New Beginnings Reentry Services, women in empowerment to come in and live up to 18 months. Why we address the trauma, why we address the addiction, why we allow a woman to just kind of meet herself. And so that's who we are. That's what we did. We have this home is right here in Dorchester. We believe that we should be back in the community and start the world of healing in the community as part of the community. So that's who I am. That's my short synopsis, and I'll be open for questions when we get to that point. I hope we can really get into some dialogue of what we really should be doing as part of reimagining the community. So thank you for allowing me to share that. I'm right here with you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Stacy, thank you so much. You were so concise, and what you said was really inspiring. And when we get to the question and answer portion, we are so eager to know more and hear more of your ideas about things that we can do to take action and to reimagine a system that is really a just us with no one left out. So thank you again, Stacy. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Drew, who grew up in a suburb north of Boston, Massachusetts, and went to prison at the age of 17 when he was a junior in high school. Since his release in 2007, he's been a motivational speaker for adolescents in his community. He reinstated his license and went to school to become a CDLA truck driver and is employed by company US Foods. He's married and living with his wife and 3 children, and he's in the process of buying his first home. Welcome, Stephen.
How are you? Thank you for having me here today. Kenyatta, thank you so much for that beautiful music that you did. And Stacy, wow, what a great job. Seriously, coming from where you come from and where you're now, thank you so much for all the stuff that you've done for us, seriously. So I'm nervous a little bit. So as a juvenile, you know, I was 13 years old. I got into the system real young at 13. I was a real troubled kid for my mom, and my mom and dad didn't really know what to do with me. So they thought the system would help better than they could. So I got put into the system. I got locked up into Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester at the juvenile homes, you know, and being down there, being from a suburb of Amesbury, Massachusetts into the city of Boston, that's a change in a lifestyle. That's a change in everything. And, you know, starting there, all you really learned was how to do your things that are illegal better. Because we all just as a group would talk and see, hey, how'd you do it? How'd you, oh, da, da, da. So there was no real guidance for it. It was just all of us together trying to figure out how we're going to do things better as an adult. So as a young kid, I was in and out of DYS. I got out at a young age, 17 years old. I came home and my father packed all my bags, and all my bags were on my stairs. So I had nowhere to go. Grabbed my bags, short weeks, 2 weeks later after that, I went to prison. I went to prison for 9.5 to 15 years at 17 years old, coming out of high school. Still in high school. So that was a hard thing for me, you know, as learning as a kid, all I learned was criminal behavior, you know, and there was nothing else known as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, was criminal behavior, criminal activity, being surrounded by nothing but people that want to do things better the next time they get out, not really fix what you're there for. And, you know, you just want to get out. Everybody just wants to get out. So there's no opportunities for inmates as kids, inmates as adults inside the system. So once you're in there, people don't really remember you after a few years. You know what I mean? Everybody's seems to disappear and you're there. And as a young adult, it's tough. It's a tough situation, you know, as a 17-year-old kid going into a man's world was very shocking, for one. Two, it was no place for children to be. No, someone that doesn't know anything but child acts shouldn't be there in that type of a situation. They should be in like young kids situations. So as a young man, I got violated as trying to protect myself as a young boy and grown men. It is what it is. You know what I mean? I was victimized in prison. I was brought that with me for a very long time. And I'm still to this day trying to really mentally fix myself in that situation, you know, and that was a lot of trauma in my life. And trauma like that is something you should really focus on. For people, like people in prison, that's all they have is trauma. Everything's trauma to them. Coming back into society's trauma. Seeing people for the first time face to face, trauma. So mental health needs to be like revamped in every prison system. Every little kid's judicial system needs to be revamped ASAP. So me as a person doing so long in prison and coming back out into prison, the first thing I wanted to do was work with adolescents, you know, trying to get them figured out before they turn men, before they turn young women to come into society, you know, and that was my main focus when I came home. So that's what kept me on the right path of where I am today. And today I couldn't be in any better position right now. I make really good money. I support my family. It is what it is for the past, but all we do now is look into the future. And I appreciate everybody letting me speak today. It was actually my first speak in a very long time. So I probably bounced all over the place, but I do apologize. Thank you very much.
Oh, Stephen, no apologies necessary, please. Thank you so much for your honesty and your authenticity. This is what it's all about. This is what we need to hear, right? We need to hear the reality of what happens. So thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing a gentleman I just met a couple months ago. His name is Sky. He lives in upstate New York with his family. Sky was granted executive clemency by New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo and was released on February 1st, 2021. So yes, you heard that correct. This past February 1st, 2021, Sky was released. He is the recipient of an activist grant upon his release, and he is presently expanding his organization's capacity to serve the needs of incarcerated men and women and working as a decarceration strategist. He is a program associate at Galaxy Gives, a philanthropic organization focused on supporting organizations and people working to defend the integrity of our democracy and change our criminal justice system. We can all please give a nice welcome to Sky.
All right, thank you, thank you. You know, we had a glitch, you know, I'm inclined to be real, right? We're having a conversation about something really important, it's okay. Had a little glitch in the internet on my side, and it went out for a moment, and Kenyatta just started the song. So I'm like, oh, frantic. I'm like, what's the irony in this? It's terrible. And when I was able to reconnect, he was singing the last part of it. And so I'm sorry, I missed your song, but I feel like the piece that I caught was, and the title of your song is What's Left, right? Is that right? And the part that I got of your song was What's Left is love, right? I showed back up when you declared what's left is love, and that's exactly it, right? There was nothing. If all you sung about was about that, I got it. Thank you. And it really perfectly frames what this conversation is about and like what has brought us here. I want to, you know, I've been thinking about a few questions, and 7 minutes isn't a lot. When I think about the speakers that preceded me, from Stacy to Steve, starting with Kenyatta and his song and his music, I'm recognizing that I'm a part of a whole. This is a larger narrative. This is a larger conversation. This is a larger human experience through all of us collectively. And Stacy's been out for a long time. Steve's been out. Stacy has put herself in a situation where she's helping others. Steve has put himself in a situation where he's reconstructed his life successfully as a family. He's anchored in the world again in a way that's respectable and inspirational to others. Kenyatta, your music just, it soothes, it's balm for all of us. And, you know, here I am now recognizing what I'm supposed to speak about besides what I may have thought I was, right? And it's continue the conversation that you have all started tonight. So I'll just there's a few things that I want to talk about, and I'll talk about in bullets. There's not much continuity, but there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of love in what's important in it, what I have to say. So what I want you to know, if I can frame this question, what I want you to know is that trauma behind the wall, like Steve has said already, is very real. And as Stacy has added, is that there aren't real outlets for that behind the wall. And just coming out, you know, we talk about trauma and they know that experience, but in the time of COVID, all of you sit in your homes wondering, when will you get resume? When will your lives resume? When will the things that bring you joy and happiness, when you have access to them again? When can you just look at a stranger on the street and smile in their face and have gratuities between you that make you feel good on the rest of your stroll home, right? In prison, that was never an accessible thing to us. And then now in the time of COVID, we get bottled into the corners, jam-packed. The reality of COVID behind prison walls is that you can't socially distance. It's the nature of the structure. It's the nature of managing human beings in cages, is that you don't have too far to go in the first place, right? And then when COVID demands that you create space, there's no space to give, right? And so that turns what is already a horrific and scary thing to manage, as a feature of life to persist in every day, just became more horrifying. If that was even possible, COVID revealed to all of us that it was. And so what we need in response to that, I just want to say, is your curiosity, the curiosity of the public to just simply know about the lives of the people incarcerated, why they're still there. There's a conversation going on out here, yes, about prison abolition, mass incarceration, but we also need that curiosity to penetrate, because the system being deconstructed, this institution that is well rehearsed in its violence, well vested and well resourced in exacting that upon the lives of people inside, it will not concede without a fight. And so while we're persisting in this fight out here, what are we doing for the lives that are inside amidst this storm? right? And I think that this conversation here today, I think that this gathering here today by one spirit in action, one spirit, this larger entity, is exactly as Kenyatta has said. It's what's left, it has to be love. And in fact, it will be love, because that's the transformative power. And it's the antithesis of a system that is thriving on our violence, either directly or by our omission, our passive acceptance to live indifferent to the fact that it's happening, right? Or our capacity to just accept it in a way that's saying, hey, look, I didn't start it. I'm not responsible for it. It's not at my own individual hand, and it's just the way of life. Right? If we can understand that fundamentally it's about love, then outside of that, it becomes about our relationship and connection to others. And so if there is a request, if there is something that anyone who wants to be involved, who's curious, who's not already involved, needs to know, it's that you already possess a defining power. And that's your curiosity, right? There's a wall. We know about the Berlin Wall, right? Separating East and West Germany, right? And the coming down of that wall was bringing two cultures who were the same cultures, who were the same people, only separated by politics. That prison wall is a separation of us, dehumanizing and alienating us, and making to the inside, and for people on the outside, making you foreign, making us foreign to you, right? We need that wall to come down. And the way to insinuate yourself into that system is just finding ways to be curious and answer those questions. Read the book. Look up on the web and see what organizations are in fact doing in your own area and broadly across the nation. There's a movement going on seeking to change something that seems like it just emerged, but it didn't just emerge, right? This criminal justice system and the way in which it functions has historical roots that have been thriving, that have been reinforced, that have become integrated and intertwined inextricably, seemingly, in our society, in the way in which we live our lives. And we must re-examine that institution. But the way to do that is also to re-examine ourselves, right? And one spirit in action, one spirit is a community. It's beautiful that we're invited here. It's beautiful to be here speaking to a community that you are the vanguards of spirit. You are the vanguards of compassion and humanity in the world. Spiritual communities are that. That's what you sign up for. That's what you study for, to get more intimate and connected to, right? And what we need behind prison walls is exactly that, because we're under a set of conditions where we forget. We get so caught up on survival that we forget that more nuanced, right? That more nuanced and granular feature of ourselves that's transcendent. It becomes all about our survival of this physical flesh, right? It becomes about the pain and suffering about this body, right? And so to have another way of thinking about our existence behind the wall is really fundamental. Another way to be empowered in spite of being in a cage is also important. And so the connection, what I want to offer today, and I'll wrap up here, is that we need access to people who will understand who we are inside. Then that recognition we want to translate much broader to evaluation of the lives of the people inside. And when the lives of the people inside are valued by you, the public, then the institution must find it harder and more difficult to just do what they want to do to us with impunity, as they have exercised for generations and for years. And when that is true too, then the people realize that they have more power than what the system is telling them. Their value, their justice, their access to justice isn't just what the system gives them by locking up a juvenile like Stephen, or just shutting down women as a way of addressing their being neglected and devalued and disrespected throughout our history, our patriarchal society. Prison isn't a response to that. And when we step up and value the lives of the people inside, we also start making demands on our system, because it functions in the absence of our demands. And that demand just starts with a very simple thing. And Kenyatta started us off with that tonight. And that's just love, right? Mother Teresa said that we all belong to one another. We're forgetting that. Heidi opened in saying that this conversation is about the forgotten community, right? The people inside who are our neighbors. But we're your neighbors, but we're also your fellow citizens, right? And we're all connected. And when we bond with one another, institutions and all their defects, because there is no perfect institution, in all their defects, they have to come back to us. And it could just be much more successful. We have so much more power than we're exercising. And it starts with our curiosity. So we can be curious enough, and then when we get involved, we realize our power, and then with that power, we start making demands, and then we can re-envision a different society where people are having their trauma addressed, because that is key here. And address your own, because you don't have to be incarcerated to be traumatized, right? To be suffering from trauma. And the families of incarcerated people are traumatized, and people who work inside prisons are traumatized. And there's just layer on layer of trauma in our world. And so it can begin with us and just our curiosity. So that I thank you. Thank you, One Spirit. Thank you for everybody that's here. I hope that message resonates.
Oh my. Oh my. The message does resonate indeed. Each of you has given us such a gift, and you've been succinct, you've been powerful in your remarks, and you've started us off with so much that we can move now into a deeper conversation. But I just want to go down the line. Kenyatta, you moved us so much. You moved me so much with your song, the words, your voice, the melody. It was amazing. Stacy, as I said, inspired by your life and your commitment and what you're doing. Stephen, yes, just inspired by what you are doing with adolescents as well as your family, and Sky, who I also met a few months ago. Just so moved by the things that you have us think about and the things that you are doing as well. So with that said, now we have the opportunity to get into a conversation. So let's just please remember that in order to have this conversation, there's so many of us, which is a beautiful thing. You need to raise your virtual hand, and David will recognize you, and David has to unmute you. So he will do that so that you can ask your question or make a comment, or both. We would ask if you make comments, though, you just try to be brief so that as many people as possible can participate in the conversation. As you ask questions, feel free to address your question to a specific presenter or any or all presenters who want to answer your question. And also, if you like, you can write your question in the chat, and my wonderful co-facilitator, Heidi, will read as many of them as time permits, interspersed with the questions that people ask as they raise their hands. And one more thing, we ask, if you raise your hand so that you can be unmuted, please, since you can see us, please put your camera on, if at all possible, so that we can see you as well. So with that said, the floor is open for our conversation. David, please facilitate this for us.
Hi, I just want to thank all of the presenters. Your stories were so well told, and you made everything so clear and taught us things. I have a question for Stacy. You said that when you were still in prison, and that your sisters in prison with you taught you what to do when you get out to help you to make a new life. What did they say to you?
Well, there were two women, actually three women. There was Lynn Sullivan, who is a lifer, which means she didn't have a natural life. She is out now on lifetime of parole. Lynn Sullivan would always try to direct me into the world of education. Because my last sentence was just 3 years, the way the law and policies are set up, you had to have 5 years or more in order to go into a degree program with BU. The prison, the DOC had a contract with Boston University. And because I didn't have 5 years, she advocated for me to go in and learn creative writing. She felt that was an outlet to my pain, to my trauma. And then Angie Jefferson, who is a natural lifer, said to me one day, she says, Stace, you continue to keep coming here. You keep coming through here. One day you might do something destructively under the influence, and you might be in here like me. And I think that when you hear somebody say like me, and you hear somebody's in there for life, that kind of evokes some matured part of myself, meaning, what? You're never going to come home? That changed something in my brain development. Not so much for me to believe that maybe I'll end up in here for life, but I could not process that she is in here for the rest of her life. And that kind of changed some courses for me, along with other things that, cumulative things that helped me mature. So those two are the things that I hold on to know that these are injustices. If we're in a group and we're all expressing or learning to express our pain of sexual assaults, molestation, domestic violence, and we didn't know how to articulate or even handle those emotional states. And these are the way that we acted out, or even in defense, trying to defend ourselves, and we've become incarcerated. I knew then that this was something that I had to do. This is something that I found my purpose in knowing I had to come out and be a voice for my sisters that I left behind. Did that answer that, Donna?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Stacy, can you repeat again what is a natural lifer? Can you define that again, please?
That means that you are spending the rest of your life in that prison in a cage with no possibility of parole. So you in Massachusetts is first degree, that's with the intent. Normally it's really not even an intent. It means that there's a district attorney and a public defender or an attorney, could be private, that makes a deal, a plea deal. Now, if you don't want to take the plea, then they're going to force you into going for trial, and your charge is first degree. If they could always lower it to a second, then where's the intent? I think that our laws and policies are so screwed up that, as Sky said, that we've indoctrinated and we've perpetuated the idea that people can't heal, that people are no good and they should just be put away in the prison system. And they've developed this for decades. And now we're just in that perpetuated state that as soon as you cause harm to someone, no one ever thinks that, I wonder what happened. I wonder, why did you do that? We're human beings. We're not perfect people. Hurt people hurt people. And we know the statistics, especially for women. I mean, that's not to say that men aren't sexually abused or molested as well. These aren't natural acts. That just means that that person, something happened, neglect, harm, something. And so our idea of these conversations and this dialogue is to really try to bring into a different narrative to say, maybe we should talk about different languages. Maybe we should talk about transformation, transform the system, transform an individual. How can we do a transformative self into restorative justice? How can we really heal from the harm and then be held accountable ourselves for the harm that we've caused to somebody else? And then bring the two parties together in a restorative way instead of this punishing, violent culture that we've created over the past 40, 50 years.
Thank you.
I'm Snow Thorner. I'm here as an ambassador with the Compassion Prison Project. We are a national and also with a little bit of representation in Europe, nonprofit. So I would like to invite you all to, well, let me explain for a moment. Sorry. Our mission is to transform prisons and communities into trauma-informed and trauma-healing institutions. Actually, our dream is that someday prisons will no longer be necessary. I want to commend you all. You've put together a beautiful program. It's very, very well organized. It's very clear to follow step by step. And what I've heard so far about the prevalence of trauma behind the bars, which actually there's trauma everywhere, and it's the rare individual who has not been traumatized in some way, in some fashion throughout their life. I'm in total agreement. There is addressing trauma and addressing mental health is number one, and punishing people is not serving at all. We see the folks who are incarcerated as family, as our brothers and our sisters. So I love the whole emphasis in this program of how can we become more active family toward these individuals, and what can we do to assist them. So I don't want to take up too much time, but we're doing some amazing work, and we do need a lot of help, and we have 100-some volunteers, and we need hundreds more. So if anyone would like to take a look at compassionprisonproject.org, you'll find a 6-minute video called Step Inside the Circle, which I would really encourage you to take a look, and maybe it'll resonate with you or someone you know. And also, if anyone would like to get in touch with me personally and has any questions, or I can make any connections for you, look me up on Facebook under Snow Thorner, or email me at snow.thorner@msn.com. Thanks a lot.
Snow, thank you so much. All the things that you are doing, thank you for that. And thank you for sharing the details that you did, because what this program is all about is connecting people who want to be of service to organizations and other people who are being of service. So thank you. That was, if I may say, right on time.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. And thank you for the opportunity and building the foundation. So I felt motivated to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you again.
Thank you. Rob would like to ask each of the panelists if you could speak about your experience of spirituality while incarcerated. And why don't we just, if you want, we'll just go in the order that Stacy, Stephen, Sky, if that's okay.
Heidi, can you say that again? I'm sorry, I was kind of
Sure.
chat with Linda.
Sure. What was your experience with spirituality while you were incarcerated?
You know what? I walked up in the library. I had an opportunity to work in the law library as to part of the work, the other work that we do through participatory defense organizing. But while I was up in the law library in the institution, in the prison, we had a building called the institution where you go to school, you go to the library, you go to the law library. I walked by the library to the law library, and I saw this book that said, "Make Your Mind an Ocean." And I saw the front cover was just water. It was so beautiful and moving. And I said, wow, I wonder what could that mean? Make my mind an ocean. So I stood at that window and looked at the book, and I said, there was nothing there but water. But I'm looking beyond water, was nothing. And I said, I wonder if that's the spiritual connection that I keep seeking. So I began to make my mind an ocean. I had so much stuff going on in my head, my left hemisphere of memories of good stuff and right memories of trauma, and my amygdala had all my emotional and flight or fight and all this, you know, my frontal cortex hadn't quite developed yet in my decision making. And I'm like, just be quiet and sit still and make your mind an ocean. And that was my spiritual journey in every process. When I tell you all that when I talk about the universe, every step of the way that I made that connection, the doors just started opening up and I was no longer in prison. I was in prison in my own mind. And when I really realized that, every step of the way, creating New Beginnings Reentry Services, community connection, all these organizations, going in and speaking to judges and connecting with district attorneys and even saying, hey, I like Rachel Rollins in Suffolk County. Who knew I would like a DA? I kind of grew up and I'm just like every step of the way, someone comes in the path of my spiritual realm and I just give it to the universe. Every step of the way, I'm just like, that's the universe speaking. I can't question it anymore.
Thank you. Stephen?
So me as a young boy, really young, I was a very spiritual boy. I was raised in a house with God in my life. So as going to prison, I kind of lost my faith when I went to prison, because kind of like, oh, God did this to me type thing, you know what I mean? So the only reason I did go to church when I was in prison was actually just to get out of my cell and to meet up with other people and see normal people around and not just away from everybody. So, I mean, for me, religion wasn't for me in prison because I just wasn't focused on that. I wasn't focused on myself. It was kind of like just fear, you know what I mean? It was kind of like to be around other people for me. So that would be my answer for that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Sky?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. It allows you to have sort of a longitudinal discussion in the moment, right? And so just like Steve, I was raised in the church, and however, in my home in particular, a lot of people have already talked about trauma. And to Stacy's point, you know, there are men are also sexual abused too. And so I was a foster child, brought into a home where I guess they made it their economy to adopt different children, but in the very strict religious Pentecostal tradition, they spare not the rod, and they also had time to sexually abuse the children. So, you know, when I left the home, I left with a certain rebellion in my heart. That rebellion was against the caregivers as well as God, right? And that's just to be blatantly, brutally blunt. And so when I went to go disassociate with my life, that history, just recasted myself on the street corner because it was just way too easy for young Black boys to do so, just to sort of assimilate and meld into the chaos in the unfortunate circumstances in the minority communities. And I'm this kid from the suburbs. And so I just did that, changed my name from Clifton and turned my name into Malik and said I wasn't from East Greenbush or suburb. I said I was from Brooklyn, right? You know, just recast my whole identity to disassociate with everything that made me angry. And, you know, so in that way, by the time I really just mucked it up, you know, my life up. And so when I got into prison, there was a reckoning around that. And so, but I still wasn't resolved to go back to Christ. I was on hunt for someone else, you know, something else, because larger questions in one's life are religious questions, despite our resistance to rationalize it through science or something. These are still very spirited questions. And so I went to NOI, I went to Muslim services, I went to Quaker services, I went to various places, just positioning myself in this space and see what it felt like, see if what resonated with me, what people did I see that inspired me. I essentially settled, not after I ran into the book, Make Your Mind an Ocean, but I did run into that book, Stacy, hello. And I settled actually in Buddhist practice, meditation and calming. That was good for me because the little man that was on fire about his past and about the situation that he found himself in needed to relax a little bit. And I'm still working on that, relax. I'm still working with processing that trauma out now that I'm free. It's only been 90 days, so it's not enough time. I'm gonna finish this call with you and I'm gonna turn on something pretty hard rockish like, right? And say that you still got a fight on your hands, but I know that it's not a fight on my hands, it's a spiritual letting go. And I have to find my way to do that. But in prison, I'll end by saying this, that you all, again, back to my theme and back to our message as a panel, you are all the access point to that, without the community necessarily reaching out to me. I just plop myself in the pew during different religious group services. But there's different entry points for Christ. There's different entry points for spirituality, and you could be it, because you answer a very fundamental question through the practice that you have, and having a relationship to just you, believing in you, another human being, before I believe in a greater power that I want to blame for a lot of misfortune in my life, makes the wading into the water a little bit easier. It makes believing again a little bit more accessible. So yeah. Thank
you. No, thank you. Thank you all for that. This is such an important question. I would like to invite two of our participants and guests who are with us tonight. You're all guests, and two guests that One Spirit in Action has had some additional conversation with. And so Kenyatta and Minister David, in that order, just because we need to have some order, would each of you speak briefly in answer to that question? What role spirituality played for you?
Sure, thank you. It's interesting. I found myself, for whatever reason, since I was young, folks would follow me. And the thing is, I remember something that my father said to me, that if you running, but you're way out ahead, but you're leaving everybody else behind, then you're not leading, you're just running really fast. But the thing is that I didn't want to lead. Certain things felt like a responsibility, and so I was always struggling, trying to make the world conform to some idea of what I thought would be comfortable for me, and I was consistently thwarted. And when you ask that question, I think of a time. There was a brother David, will remember him, Brother Jerry, when I was inside, and Brother Jerry was huge. Just one of the biggest, most physically powerful men that I've ever met. Anyway, but he was so gentle in spirit, and he would weep, for his appreciation for what God had done for him, just openly weeping. That always struck me a certain way as a young man, because I was young when I was when I met him in prison. And so one day I was spinning around the yard, and he saw me, and I was really down. I was just wrestling with things about how I viewed myself. And this goes back to what Stephen and Scott are talking about. And just, there's a system that is designed and implemented and constructed to tell us that we don't have value and worth. And it's huge, and it's got incredible resources, and it's beating it into our head, saying that you did this thing, and so as far as we're concerned, you no longer even have the right to be human. If we decide to kill you, then some folks are going to object, they're going to stand outside with signs, but whatever. So that the weight of what that is and what that does and what that valuation is. I was spinning the yard, and I was really, really having some difficulty with what I believed I was and what failings I believed I had. And Brother Jerry came and he walked past me, and he just was like, "Hey," he's like, "What's going on?" And for whatever reason, I just opened up, and we'd never had this type of conversation before. And I opened up to him, I talked about it. And when I finished, he said, "Brother, you should know that however far you've come and wherever you are, you've come that far because God brought you. And wherever you are, you're there because it's where God put you and allowed you to be. And wherever you're going from here, you're going to get there because God is going to take you." And it was, I suppose I'd heard all those things before, yet somehow in that moment, it was an incredibly liberating thing to have the freedom of knowing that I was kept, that I was held, that I was brought. And in that moment, and later on, not to say that I don't still struggle and have difficulty with self-will, because I am a stubborn man. But that said, that freedom in that space, even while I was physically captive, sustained me throughout my incarceration and sustains me now as well.
Thank you so much, Kenyatta. Minister David, some brief comments on this question for you, please, from you, please.
Okay, guys, can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I was just so moved by the testimonies and the knowledge that you guys, poured out today. And I wanted to say to each and every one of you that, I end up catching 17 years to life in prison. And I'm gonna tell you something. I grew up in a Christian background family, and I strayed away from that type of living, that type of lifestyle, because I kind of figured I was bigger than that. I didn't need God in my life. God wasn't lost, I was lost. And I'm gonna tell you, I was lost for real. In the streets of New York City, I was lost. I was violent, volatile. And just to be able to hear my brothers them share what they shared today, and my sister share what she shared today, it really touched my heart. But in that experience, when I caught that 17 years to life, the district attorney wanted me to get 25 years to life, but the judge said, no, I'm not going to get this man 25 years to life. And I know it was injustice to me because I was just only a persistent violent felony offender. I did not kill anyone. But in the state of New York, if you're a persistent violent felony offender, 3 loser with a violent felony, you automatically get life in prison. So the district attorney wanted me to get the full 25 years, but the judge said no. He ended up giving me 17 years. But before my sentence, I was in the bullpen getting ready to get sentenced. And when I turned around, I seen a guy there. I asked him, I said, how you get here? Because it was a lawyer sitting there at first, but he came to that bullpen. I don't know how he got there. I said, what's your name? He said, Emmanuel. I said, man, that means God is with me. And he smiled, and I turned around. When I turned around, he was gone. And I'm not trying to sound spooky, but I'm gonna just tell you what I went through. And I am so glad I experienced that, because God was letting me know I'm with you. And I'm gonna tell you something. I had some real experience, dealing with the supernatural in prison, especially with Kenyatta and I came up at. We were trained in Greenhaven Correctional Facility, a maximum secure prison, maximum aid prison. And I am so happy that I allowed God to come into my life, because it created a lot of healing for me. Yes, I mean, my mind was twisted. My spirit was twisted. My soul was twisted. I obtained all my education in prison. And I just thank God for renewing my mind, teaching me how to be a man first and then a man of God. And I had to learn to accept my responsibility. I couldn't blame the white man, the green man, the purple man. I couldn't blame my daddy, my mama, my sister, and my brother. I had to look at me. I had to look at me, and I had to make a conscious decision, an executive decision, where I'm gonna still like Steve say, in prison, you just learn bad things, how you gonna do it better. You understand? And that's what you learn in prison. But I really had to take a look at me. And God allowed me to take a look at me and accept my responsibility and be accountable for my action, to be a man up. I want you to accept it. And I'm not gonna be long, but that's when I'd allow God to come into my life and to do a lot of healing from all those wounds, those traumas that I went through as a young boy, as a child, seeing my father beat my mama. And I'm thinking that's love. And I had a misconception about a lot of things, but God healed me, not holding anything against my father, not holding anything against my mother, not holding anything against those people that hurt me, that betrayed me. You see, and so I really thank you for asking that question. What did you experience spiritually? How did you experience that when you was in prison? And I know for me, and I'm not talking about somebody else, God have raised me up. And I've been home now. You came home in 2010. I came home in 2011. And September the 1st, 2011 of this year would be 10 years. and the clock starts all over again for me now. I have been to 14 countries. I have 2 jobs. I'm getting ready to start my own business. And God have been doing great things in my life. I'm a minister for the gospel of Jesus Christ. I love reaching the young now. I love to be able to reach them before the system reached them and cause them to be scarred for the rest of their lives. Because I'm gonna tell you something, that system, that street, not the injustice system, but that street scarred me for the rest of my life until God came into my life and brought forth the healing, renewed my mind. So my mind is an ocean now for God. My mind is the ocean to be able to meet people like you guys and to be able to connect with you guys so we can be able, because I'm gonna tell you something, freedom costs. If you look back, freedom costs you something. And I'm gonna tell you, it costs in what you guys are doing right now. And I am just so moved. I am so moved by you guys and what you guys are doing. And thank you so very much for blessing me with this opportunity to be a part of this right here. Kenyatta, you still got it going on, man. I appreciate you. God have really blessed you with that gift. And you continue to use that gift for his glory and for his honor. Thank you guys so very much, all right?
Thank you, Minister David, for that powerful testimony. I knew you were going to bring it because I know what you do. And Brother Kenyatta, of course, thank you also for sharing as all our panelists did. We have time for a couple more questions. So how about we take one from a raised hand and one from the chat if there's another in the chat.
I can't thank you enough for this experience. My question is a bit personal. I live in Colorado. I have a young Black nephew who has been incarcerated since he was 19. So he's never been really a man on his own. He and I have been writing. He's going to be released in July. And I have learned a lot already tonight about some of the things I can do. So I just wondered if there was any recommendations for me out here. I don't know if I can try to find a place like New Beginnings in Rochester. Just anything that anyone can offer me, being this distance. In your discussions about trauma are really sitting with me tonight. I have never had any experience with the judicial system at all, so this is all incredibly new to me. So I am so grateful for your honesty and you giving me information that makes me be a better aunt to him. So anyway, I'll leave it with that, and I am most grateful.
Okay, of our panelists, who would like to take that one? Okay.
I can say that I'm going to drop it in the chat, a organization called Participatory Defense Organizing, which is a national movement that allows people incarcerated and when you get released, some resources. And it's a beautiful movement. They do a lot of participating in your defense, either inside or facing the injustice system or once you're released. So I'm going to drop it in the chat. We have hubs all over the country. Okay, Deb. So I'll drop it in the chat. His name is Raj. He has a whole team over there in California, and he can tell you which hub if we have one in your state, which I'm sure we do. We meet every year, every summer, and we meet together and we come together and we bring all the states of all the injustices or all the support that we've given individuals, and we pull the numbers together and we help tens of thousands of people in a year come out on parole, come out on wrongful convictions. I was just telling Heidi and Ms. Rahim that we just assisted a young man who was incarcerated in Massachusetts for 47 years, wrongfully convicted. It took us 4 years to get somebody to hear the injustice where Stevie Wonder could have seen it. I can't process or understand why, other than he's a Black man and he was chosen by the Boston police, a corrupt officer that buried him away to allow an informant to stay out here. So, these are the things that across the country, we're coming together, community leaders, to really help support young Black men and women, white young men and women, anybody. Come home into the community and reacclimate back into themselves, into family. So I'm going to drop it in the chat. Okay.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're
Scott,
welcome.
you're on mute. Unmute, Scott. Yes.
Yeah, no, I gotta wait for the man to give me control here. I got it.
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
That's all right. So I just want to add to that, Deb. So first of all, I just kind of like want to breathe around your grief that you're feeling on behalf of your loved one. Again, as I commented before, like my parents really did the distance with me. I should tell you that so the family that I left is not the family that I'm with now. During my period of incarceration, I was adopted through an adult adoption, a very rare thing. And in terms of Kenyatta talking about, and Minister David talking about when God's got you, letting you know, I know somebody's got me, that's for sure. And but in the care of my family now, Deb, it's really critical. And I was just released February of this year. I only got 90 days out in the world, and it's really important that if you're going to have contact, if you're going to be the main support, or if you're going to be in support of those who have the main support of this young man when he's being released, that there's going to be a tension. There's this natural tension between a person who's being released back into the world of having the space to rediscover who they are outside of a cage. Right? And there's going to be a lot of contradictions in that. There's going to be a lot of failing to meet what you may feel with your heart and know with your wisdom of how that young man needs to position himself back in the world. But he's not yet going to know that until he reconnects with who he is in the world. And the worst thing, only to compound the trauma, is when your love and your needs for him to be safe and his need to rediscover with himself who he is clashes. That only adds a layer of trauma, because he already knows that he's not doing well with figuring it out already, and then he's only disappointing the person that he loves the most, right? And so I just really want to offer that, because that is my lived experience now, and I'm fortunate to have a resilient family who we check in, even when we're wounded by each other. With we take a step and then we come back. And so he's going to need a lot of breathing and returning. Thank you.
No, thank you, Sky, and thank you, Deb, for that very tender, important question. If you will forgive me, I had said that we'd have one more question from the chat, but as I look at the time, we won't be able to do that. So please forgive me for that. But what we're going to do now is move to this last segment of our program. We've been talking all along about resources, and there are resources have been put in the chat. And now we will turn our attention specifically to the resources that are available. So I would like to introduce to you another One Spirit in Action member, and if I'm not mistaken, co-founder, Reverend Laureen Williams, and she will tell us some things about the resource document that we have compiled, or we are compiling.
Yes, thank you so much, Salome. And the co-founders of One Spirit in Action are Sonia Ketchian and Tyrone Holmes. I'm just a classmate who's very supportive. And so thank you for that, Salome. So as Salome said, I'm Reverend Laureen Williams, class of 2013, and I'm really delighted and privileged to be part of this and thankful for all of you being here in attendance for this very important conversation. I'm going to be covering some of the opportunities, not necessarily specifically, but I do want to speak to that it is action that makes the difference. It is action that moves life forward. And that is why we felt it important, not just simply to have this conversation to bring awareness, to expand consciousness, but to also present opportunities for action, because as I like to say, we want to walk the talk. And the only way to do that, to really marry the tongue in your mouth to the tongue in your shoe, is by taking the action in alignment with what you say. And so we have started compiling a document that is called the resource list. This will be a living document. So by that, I mean that it will be updated ongoingly. Right now, we just started with a few links. It is broken up in sections. The first section is links that bring you to being more educated around mass incarceration, around reform, around advocacy, around policy. And so the beginning part are several links to various organizations that are doing amazing things. Some you may know of, like the Equal Justice Initiative. Others you may not be familiar with, like vera.org. So we invite you to take a look at that. And of course, if you know of any organizations, please add them to the chat, as that is my responsibility to add to that list. And so I've been taking notes as the program has happened. The next section is an opportunity to support, and part of that support are opportunities to donate. We were blessed by Kenyatta's gift of song. And one of the programs that he shared with us is a program that Carnegie Hall does with Sing Sing, which is musical connection. So that is listed on there. There are also some organizations that do work with women, just like Stacy's organization, New Beginnings. You also have a couple of organizations that work with youth. And so I invite you to look at those organizations. And in addition to the ones that I listed for educational purposes, there are also opportunities to donate to them as well in support. In the last section are the actual opportunities to volunteer. On there is a program that allows you to support people with their writing. I think Stacy might have been the person that spoke to doing a creative writing class. And writing, you know, as we all know, writing is in journaling is such a great source of expression, a great opportunity for healing. It allows us to know ourselves in a remarkable way. And so there's a program that's regarding supporting those who are incarcerated with sharing their stories and returning to themselves. There's also one, I think it's in Brooklyn, that's a organization that brings together books for those who are currently incarcerated. And so there's a chance to, you know, buy books, also donate books, to also go to them, because I know with COVID restrictions, but I do know that they are having opportunities where people can come and help them package books. So that is also an opportunity. And for those of you who joined us last year, in 2 years ago, I guess it was in 2019, we worked with the Osborne Foundation. And so they are also listed as an organization with whom you can volunteer. And I wanted to leave a few minutes to defer to Sky, because one of the other opportunities for volunteering is with Transforming Lives. And that's how we came to know Sky. And I would like to give him a few minutes to speak to that organization. And so, as I said, this will be a living document. We invite you to, look at the links, get acquainted, educate yourselves, engage, and we hope that this resource list empowers you to participate, to bring your curiosity into consciousness, into action, so that we can really reimagine a world where all are honored and taken care of and have dignity. So Sky, all yours.
Hey, thanks, Laureen. And thank you to just One Spirit as an entity, as a whole. And, I'm just looking at all these beautiful faces, and I see a lot of wisdom here. I see a lot of youth, some youth. And by youth, I mean, if you're 40 in your, in your late 40s or whatever, because the age that I'm looking at is a lot of wise people. And what's really important about the wisdom that most of you carry, I think when we get of your age, well, what do I know about being your age, right? And so I'll slow down that introduction. But it's clear, like my folks now, we engage in conversation, and like when you get older, you just want to know that you've made some impact and some difference in the world, right? You know, and most of us, we do that with our children, right? You do that with your children, your immediate community, if you're involved in your immediate community, and even being involved in larger communities like One Spirit, right? And so there is the question, you know, how do I spend my time in retirement and still being able to make a difference, but also just not stressing myself out and just enjoying the rest of my life because you worked so hard throughout your life. And Transforming Lives is a mentorship program. And what we're doing is we're connecting people, professionals, retired people, activists, just, you know, anybody who steps up and says, I'm curious about what's going on behind the wall. I should tell you that the system does violence in your name, and they don't knock on your door and ask your permission. And so if there's going to be a change of a system, don't expect them to knock on the door and say, do you want us to change? They're not asking you that either. They're doing things in your name. And so like the changing of the system that's necessary, bringing greater humanity into it, is really just takes you to be curious, to look up. And so there's always a question in any talk we give of where can I go? How can I get involved? You know, there's this beautiful thing that I've just recently discovered called Google. If you say prison activism near me, I think something pops up maybe. I don't know. I haven't tried it because I'm like in the middle of it all, but I'm just saying, you know, a very basic curiosity actually is going to go a long way in the world that we're living in now. And it's not, you won't be alone, right? You won't be alone, and you'll have access to it, just like you have access to me right now, just like I have access to you, and I'm so grateful to have it, right? But Transforming Lives as an organization, and our website is down right now because we're cleaning it up. And I, you know, part of that is because I'm just getting home and I'm like, hey, I wanted to say this and that and this and that. And it's like I'm doing in the store when I go to the store for the first time. I'm picking out a whole bunch of things that I won't eat and I don't need. And that's another thing that when the nephew comes home, he's gonna a lot of things that he doesn't need, but just give it to him, please, for me, maybe. So, but Transforming Lives is connecting you with people inside so that you can know what our lives are like, and that they also, more importantly, can be inspired by you, right? Because, you know, the fact that I had greater access to people in society when I was incarcerated was my learning curve about assimilation began a long time before I actually was released back into the world. And that was really, really important, because this is a brave new world, literally. And just to be dumped into engage in it without expectation is a struggle. And it looks like the internet is messing up a little bit. So I just want to defer and say, Laureen, I know that you can get the link to Transforming Lives when our website is up and share it with the community. And so my last statement here will just be that your voice reaching out to someone who's incarcerated is really going to be important. And the last thing I just want to say, and this is aside from Transforming Lives, in case I don't get another opportunity to say anything in closing, Salome, will I have a chance to say something in closing? Can I just take that now?
This is it.
This is it. Okay. So in closing, I think I'd really be remiss, and I've had a few conversations since I've been out with different communities, and I have been remiss. And so right now, I just want to start a better habit. And with you, One Spirit, is that there's a lot of people out here speaking about the experience of incarceration, and we're not often talking about the victims. And it's important. And so, you know, my own experience could be like, yeah, it's been all about the victims. They smashed me, slammed me on my head, disavowed any fact that I may have been a traumatized young youth out here running from it in an unhealthy way, admittedly. But it was only about the victims so that they can exact violence and punish me. And so, but it's more than that, right? It's that, yeah, there's problems going on in our communities that need really addressing and need people to step up and address those problems. The violence of the institution is just not the answer. It's other people stepping up and being involved that is going to be the answer. It hasn't happened yet. Enough people haven't stepped up and made a demand to just let their hands do some work. Your hands can do some work, and we need your hands doing some work on behalf of not just the people inside, but also people who are victims, because they want more than just a system that is going to do violence in their name after violence has been done to them. They deserve more. They deserve a system that actually can lend them and provide them some healing. In some cases, you know, it's not. But you will be surprised how much of a difference it actually makes, because it's rare, those cases. The criminal justice system is doing a lot of violence in cases that don't necessitate the violence that they're delivering. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sky.
Thank you,
Heidi's going to
Sky.
take you on home. And but I just want to say very quickly that if you haven't noticed in the chat, there's a link to that take action list, and that Reverend Laureen talked about that will be updated. And I just got to say, I'm just so grateful. I can't say how grateful I am for everybody who's come and everybody who's spoken and asked and answered questions. And now I'm supposed to stop because Heidi's taking us out.
Hey, Salome, you said it all. I just want to express my profound gratitude to each of the panelists for spending the time with us tonight. So if we could all show them a little love, a little snap, a little whoop, whoop, you know, and to all of you in the audience, thank you for coming. And I hope you found this evening informative. And my hope is now that you are awake with this new knowledge, that you will ask yourself, what action will you take to not forget your brothers and sisters behind the walls? So again, a profound gratitude. Thanks again to everyone, and blessings to all of you for a peaceful and restful evening. So thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
Night,
you.
everybody. God bless you.
Night all.
Thank y'all
That's
so much. It was a
great.
wonderful
Thank you.
evening. Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you all.
Y'all be blessed. Be well.
Blessings to all.
Be well all.
Thank you, Lynn.
Like
Night, everyone.
Good night. God bless you. I love you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Debbie.
Night and God bless.
God bless.
God bless.
God bless.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.